Welcome back again. You're still watching us here on The Daily Debate. I'm very much delighted to have joining me in the studio this evening Dr. Ibrahim Al-Ghazawy, Professor of International Relations. Thank you for joining me, Doctor.
Thank you so much.
Let's first start by talking about the Libyan file. And we have a Libyan delegation who is on a visit to Egypt and arrived yesterday. And they particularly came from the south of Libya. We're talking about 75 delegates of sheikhs and different sects of this part of Libya. Of course, under the auspices of President al-Sisi, this Egyptian National Commission on Libya has been convening, and the people in the south of Libya, they have certain recommendations and demands. Let's talk about the importance of this visit and how you view it so far.
Well, when we talk about Libya, for a country like Egypt, our country, it's not just a neighborhood relation. The nature of the relation between Egypt and Libya goes very far beyond normal neighboring countries and classic relations. We talk about more than 170 kilometers of joint border. Most of this long border line is uninhabitable areas, and some of it mountainous, some of it geographically unserviceable when it comes to public services, etc. It means that covering this very long line of border between the two countries by normal security measures, more or less impossible. The other issue that makes the relation is different is that Libya as a people, they are mostly tribal community. They are tribes. As the report was talking about the visit coming mostly from the south, the heads of tribes there.
Yes.
Okay, so this is the commonality of the ethnic structure in Libya, tribes. For Egypt also, the western part of Egypt, in the direction of Saloum and Marsa Matruh, and that part of western side of Egypt, we will also find that it's also a community of tribes, more or less, and Bedouins. That means the same lifestyle, the same traditions, the same habits, the same concerns and problems as well. Other side of the story is it's not just a political regime in Libya that is suffering problem, which makes us concerned here in Egypt. It's a complete society is unstable and problematic, and that makes life for us in Egypt here very much associated with the problems in Libya. That's why President Sisi, when he said that Gofra is the red line for Sarraj forces backed by Turkish forces, they should not exceed the Gofra line, because at this part of Libya, whoever gets in by the forces, you can consider him easily in Egypt. There is no barrier when they reach that line. It means that we are not talking about ordinary neighborhood relation. We talk about sort of linking living conditions between the two countries, between the two people in Egypt and in Libya. That makes Egypt, indeed, when it comes to our endless efforts and strenuous efforts to help our Libyan brothers reach a peaceful solution, that makes Egypt intervention always benign and acceptable and good, because what we need in Egypt, in Libya, is not just Egypt interests. It's Libyan interests joined together with Egypt.
Yes, you spoke about the problems of these tribes, and but we will go back and talk about it. But since they're playing out the video of President Sisi's recent visit to France, let's also talk in terms of foreign policy. And if we're going to talk about the role of the international community, I know that France and Egypt have common grounds when it comes to the final settlement and the situation in Libya. And let's talk about France's stance in specific towards the situation in Libya.
Well, actually, France, one of the very little a number of countries of superpowers in our world today that has always more or less such realistic and positive views when it comes to the sizzling causes and problems of the Middle East, of course with Libya one included. France has always been pushing for the solution that satisfy most of the people in the region, which is very good indeed. And even when it comes to the Libyan case, also the French stance and President Macron's stance on the situation in Libya has always been supportive to Egyptian vision of the solution in Libya. The idea is even when we have this problematic issue of the confrontation that happened a couple of months ago between French president and some Islamic countries and demonstrations because one of the French painters has painted some paints against our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Even for this delicate issue, Egypt has a stance and has a way to intervene in the situation, trying to mitigate, this hot atmosphere or environment that surrounded this problem until it has passed peacefully. That means that there is sort of relation between Egypt and France in good and in worse, in good situations and also in crisis situations. Also, we have to remember that even during the times when President Sisi took office in 2014, France was first to support. President Sisi visited France several times, even when there was a talk about human rights and some critiques on human rights situation in France. The President French response was so positive when it comes to Egypt is a sovereign country,
of course, yes.
and we have our own vision of things, and we have to respect that in France. I'm talking about that because the French state is recognizing very well the principle of sovereignty. The relation between Egypt and France when it comes to foreign relations and diplomatic relations in Egypt with France has always been in the highest level, which is an exemplary model indeed, because it's not like that with many other countries. So France is, I would say, a case which is very positive when it comes to this sort of very closeness vision of things to the mutual concern, like in the Middle East problems, Libyan problems, Yemeni and Syrian, etc., etc. There has always been sort of harmony or closeness and when it comes to Egypt and French vision. Of course, there is differences, and we have to accept that. We should not expect that the visions should be identical 100%. It will never happen. But it's still always, even with some differences and political views different sometimes between the two countries, but the majority of issues there is sort of agreement,
yes.
mutual.
Yes. Before we move more into the Egyptian foreign policy and its performance in 2020 on a general scope, let me first finalize speaking on the problems that the delegations from South Libya have been discussing with Egypt and had been requiring help and aid by Egypt, especially with regard to health conditions, education, and the economic harsh stances that are currently being faced by the nation of the people of Libya and the South region in particular. Let's talk more about the Egyptian efforts in not just maintaining a political stance and peace and stability, but also support to the Libyan people on these different files.
Well, Egypt of course, has always been extending a hand of support by whatever possible means that that Egypt has to our brothers, actually not only in Libya, but in Africa,
exactly.
in Sudan, in South Sudan, in Djibouti, in any other African countries which could be in need, especially when we talk about some times of crisis, like the time we go through today with the negative repercussions of COVID-19 issues and problems, an epidemic which is, of course, undermining normal life conditions in most of the African countries. Egypt has always been supportive to Libya and other African countries. But indeed, we have to rely more on the awareness of that's why I'm so glad with this visit coming from the southern part of Libya, the awareness of the Libyan people themselves. They have to, I think they do today more than ever, understand that the solution of the problems of Libya is not coming from outside. Egypt, of course, will support, and other countries probably will support if they have a sincere will to intervene in Libya. But still, the solution should be always coming from inside Libyan
within
entity,
the people
within
themselves.
the people themselves. When we talk about tribes and we talk about people have different visions on things, which is normal in any society. But the problem is in Libya today that this division between the eastern part and the western part.
Two different governments,
You have two different governments, two different parliaments, and you have the south also. And Egypt always has been pushing towards the solution that combine all of them together. At the very same time, and also that exclude those who have intervened and who are not Libyans.
Yes, the situation is indeed different now, but let's also put the weight on the international community that had contributed to this stance today, according to many different analysts, in the sense that it had internationally recognized Sarraj government as an official government in Libya, and not recognized Khalifa Haftar and the rest of the Libyan people that represent this part, and caused this very great friction and forced enemies of themselves, as I like to say, not just of other states, to be really to dare, if I may say, and step in and intervene in the internal affairs of an Arab country that's not even on their borders in the first place. So what I'm trying to say here is that today more than ever there's a need for the international community to reconsider its stance towards the recognition of Fayez al-Sarraj, especially after the interventions and the chaos that's been taking place during 2019 and 2020. So what do you think now with Egypt's support and effort and push towards this form of peace, and as we've correctly said and spoke about the French stance, that this would possibly enlarge and be carried to the United Nations to reconsider its recognition for Fayez, which expired, by the way, and nobody spoke about it at the first point. It expired as well.
Yeah, I think that the situation today has changed significantly towards the Egyptian solution of the issues in Libya. And I think also the coming weeks, I hopefully, some indications are there that there will be sort of solutions to the situation in Libya, where the western part will come again to join hands with the eastern and the south. I don't want to be, a captive to names, whether Sarraj or else. But I think
unity
the unity of the Libyan entity is what we all seek, what Egypt would like to bring about. It's not Sarraj. And the problem with Sarraj and his regime is that they just have gone easily and have thrown themselves at the arms of Turkey.
Because they have the legitimate backing of the international community.
But today, I think the situation is clearer enough for the international community, especially for the countries that supported more and more obviously the Sarraj government, they realize today that they don't have solution with the Sarraj, and it has to come again to peace negotiation and to political solution. I have also to remind you and our dear viewers that the international powers always have their own interests, you know, higher than any other interests. When they intervene in a country like Libya, they seek their own interests, and we have to understand
definitely, yes.
Yeah, they would like to safeguard their interests. They would like to come out from the problem with the benefits, the maximum, possible limit or level of benefits. So we have to, I think, we have to be skeptical when it comes to the international community intervention in Libya, especially those who have thousands of miles away from Libya. There is no. So when we talk about Egypt, I'm talking about a country that is side by side with country for more.
But let's look at it from another perspective. And when we're talking about Egypt being a leading country in Africa and very much engaged with the African affairs, with resolving the problems in Africa, with the development of the African continent, and with maintaining or ensuring that the security, peace and security is being maintained in Africa, which Libya is part of anyway, naturally, geographically. How does that make Egypt seem to be in front of world powers today? And I'm talking to you after years of hard efforts, of very strong foreign relations with clear messages and agenda that is all calling for peace at first pact and development on a second pact. How does that change this equation of how these world powers look at Africa as a continent today?
Well, I'm still not so optimistic about the situation in Africa. Indeed, I have, the language of figures and statistics is really, very, very tough. The GD, the gross domestic product of the 54 African countries altogether is $2.1 trillion a year. Only France alone, $2.2 trillion. Only France alone, $2.2 trillion a year. 54 African countries altogether, their economy, $2.1 trillion a year. It means one superpower like France, one economy. I'm not talking about Japan, which is 5.4.
Or Germany, which is even doing much more better than France.
I'm not talking about China, which is 13.2 trillion, today, yes. And I'm not talking about United States, which is $21.8 trillion a year. I'm talking only about France. So when I count this 54 African countries and add them all together as economies, and the outcome is just 2.2 or $2.1 trillion a year, we have to work a lot in Africa together. Actually, one of the things that Egypt started probably 2 years ago, and I think by the end of this December, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will come out with a plan to maximize the outcome of the free trade convention with African countries, with the 54 African countries. It's sad for us to know that only the number of intercommercial or interrelations commercially between African countries is only 16% of the total, commercial relations of African countries. All the other 84% is going out of Africa. It means that the beneficiaries of the African resources is not Africans. Most of the beneficiaries of African treasures and resources are not Africans. That's why Egypt has always been, for instance, Egypt has pushed for the creation of the fund for fighting COVID-19, Corona, and its problems in Africa. And also the other thing, the committee of the permanent committee against terrorism in Africa. Africa has to be a continent that is based on very strong mutual relations. When we know that in a country like Egypt, the commercial relation or exchange commercial relation between Egypt and Africa, the total figure is 6.2 billion US dollar a year, which is a very small figure. It's less than 16% of Egypt trades. And of course, very small when it comes to African percentage of foreign trade with other world countries. It means that we, as Africans, we still have to work on this free trade convention to take place on the ground. According to the agreement, within the coming 5 years, there will be removal 100% of the customs when it comes to commercial exchange between African countries. I think we need to do more. Africa is very rich countries indeed, very rich continent, but still mostly
the poorest continent. Yes, it's very ironic indeed. We're going to talk more about reports because when there are international reports evaluating or analyzing an economic performance of a country, and we're talking here in this regard where we're going to be taking a look at the next report, the Oxford Business Group, which is one of the leading business groups that analyzes the economic conditions of a country. And according to them and the MENA, of course, region, Egypt is the only economy that expanded in 2020 despite the COVID-19 pandemic, and maybe we see there a little bit of a more optimistic image and a light at the end of the tunnel, that despite a pandemic that had struck the world, and even those world powers have not performed well at all. I think that pandemic proved a lot of things, ironically as well. We'll talk more about that, but allow us to go to this second report. And as I said, in the MENA region, and according to the Business Oxford Group, Egypt has been one of, or the only leading country in this region that had, despite the pandemic, expanded its economy in 2020. Let's take a look.
Egypt's economy is expected to be the only one in the Middle East and North Africa MENA region to expand in 2020, despite the ongoing COVID-19 crisis, based on the country's economic resilience and broad-based structural reforms implemented prior to the pandemic. In its report for the Oxford Business Group, in response to COVID-19, they said that the Egyptian government had adopted decisive measures that balanced the need for containment with the social requirements of maintaining economic growth. The report also said that the actions taken by the Central Bank of Egypt, along with the increased lending to the private sector in response to the crises, are expected to contribute to Egypt's economic rebound over the medium to long term. Addressing the private sector in Egypt, the report predicted that the small and medium-sized enterprises will be a key driver of the private sector's economic growth. In this regard, the report added that Egypt has around 2.5 million SMEs, which accounts for 75% of the labor force. The report also expects green finances and green projects to be central to the financing in Egypt over the long term. According to the report, digitalization will be crucial for Egypt, especially digital financial services, which have been expanding rapidly. On Egypt's role in Africa, the report said that growing intra-African trade over recent years has helped provide Egyptian banks with the conditions to expand within the continent. Following a long-term focus on the domestic market, Egyptian banks are looking to Africa in coordination with the increasing investment and trade ties developing on the continent.
Welcome back again. You're still watching us here on the Daily Debate. Dr. Ibrahim Al-Ghazawy, Professor of International Relations, you're still joining us. Thank you once again. As we've seen in this report, according to the Business Oxford Group, Egypt is the only MENA country that had, and in Africa, of course, is a continent that had been doing very well with the economic performance of 2020. And against the irony and the pessimism of many who were very much against the strict austerity measures and economic reform program that Egypt has been working on for the past couple of years, many now believe and understand if it wasn't for this strong economic reform program, maybe Egypt would have never made it through this pandemic.
That's absolutely true. And we have to be very much thankful to this strict economic reforms program. And I think that this has make the greatest shift in Egypt's recent life, indeed. Moving Egypt from fragility situation to stability situation when it comes to economy. And if we get back to 2016, because we already started this program in November 2016, of course that was 3 years before COVID-19 starts. But when this epidemic started, and pandemic started, it looks like the program and its details that were taken in 2016 was designed to react positively and counter-attack against the attack of COVID-19.
Yeah, let me just clarify here, because speaking to the general public who might not be very much aware of what a strong reform program means and how has that been echoing positively despite of the pandemic. And here we're talking about including, I mean, the mega national projects,
exactly.
the new cities, the self-sufficiency in food and clean water, and in the employment of millions.
All life
that
aspects,
all falls
indeed.
under
All life
this.
aspects,
Definitely,
indeed.
that all falls under this. And when we speak of how these reports evaluate the Egyptian economy, they're not just looking directly at inflation or increase of prices, but they're also looking at the continuation of growth and infrastructure and development, despite the whole world being on stalemate.
I always rely on statistics because figures don't lie.
Exactly.
If we today have the Egyptian central bank reserves that exceeds 39 billion US dollars, and it was 36 a couple of months ago, because of the extra money expending to, trying to make up with the COVID-19 repercussions, negative repercussions over the whole
Egyptian
world
has been. I
the
mean,
whole
everybody has
world
been
is going
borrowing.
through.
Yes.
Yeah, the whole world has been going through this tunnel of borrowing and economic problems and stifling issues. But for us, all the indicators today are still going high. When you talk about the inflation rate still getting down, so, and the latest figure says it's 7.4 or 7.5, which is the least level of inflation.
Despite harsh circumstances.
Despite the harsh circumstances, despite the COVID-19, despite less rates of production and
I mean, let's talk about even shutting down the airports. That was one huge sector that lost billions of pounds.
Tourism.
Definitely.
Tourism. Talk about tourism, which was once the largest source of Egypt's foreign currency was tourism. Of course, COVID-19 means simply no tourism. It means that the 10 billion or 11 or 12 billion US dollar that Egypt used to earn annually behind tourism activities, they are not there anymore. It means that with the absence of this 12 billion US dollars, and also with the world trade activities also shrinking.
I mean, there have been factories around the world that
Suez
shut
Canal,
down, so
Suez Canal
no
also
more
revenues.
Yes.
Revenues are getting less and less because it's very much connected with the international economy and international trade levels. So with these together, this circumstances. But still, the Egyptian economy is achieving
And then you have
growth.
the payments for people that do not have stable salaries, and that was an initiative by the government under the leadership and President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi as well. We've had supporting the banks and lifting the burdens of people who had to pay debts.
The social depth of the Egyptian
that's the thing.
economy.
We're talking again about millions of
Which is very great indeed, because it means even with this harsh situation that the Egyptian economy
government
and Egyptian
was
society
supportive,
and the government, still the government is paying due attention to this humanitarian issues that should be taken care into the attention of the government. Also, we have to think it's when it comes to the foreign debt. Egypt has always up to date, paying the installments for the Egyptian debts to foreign countries, it means that Egypt is not even one day behind our international commitment when it comes to paying financial burden of the loans.
Pardon me for interrupting you here, but since you're talking about international commitments, let's talk about the investment. And when we're talking about an economy that is still ongoing and performing very well despite the pandemic, what does that mean in terms of an image and echoing back to investors who have plans and have already an agenda in terms of when they will be receiving, let's say, a certain project, the infrastructure and services for a certain factory to start off, and all these kind of logistics that have been taking place, that Egypt had shown commitment that things are still as scheduled, and if they have been postponed, they were postponed very at a short period of time rather than an unknown period, an open-ended sort of thing like the rest of the world. Let's talk more about how that had also given Egypt a great reputation for investors, foreign investors.
We have to agree on the fact that any country, it's not only Egypt, it's any country in the international community, including United States, France, Canada, any country in the world, is rely strongly and deeply on foreign investment, and they dedicate their legislative, administrative, legal, social, and all structures in their countries to support and give good service to investment life in their societies. That's why Egypt, of course, in terms of enriching and developing infrastructure to support foreign and national investment in Egypt is the only solution to the Egyptian chronic problems. Simply because if we do not receive funds from foreign funds coming to us from outside the country, we will rely only on the available funds and available financial sources that is at the hands of either of the state or the Egyptian or private sector. It means that the circulation will be very much limited to this amount of money in the narrow circle of Egypt. That's why, as I told you, every country in the world is seeking foreign investment, not only national, because foreign investment means simply that you are enlarging the volume of commerce, the volume of industry, the volume of
and opening doors for more competition, which again is also healthy for the markets.
The volume of outcomes, the volume of wages. You are minimizing the level of unemployment. You are minimizing the level of inflation. You are
increasing GDP gradually, of course, as well.
Everything. So when we talk about foreign investment, it's not an optional issue. It's a must for us.
I mean, living in an interconnected world today, it's only natural for it to happen.
You cannot do that.
Exactly.
You can't do that. And we have tested this and we have learned this. The difficult way when it came to tourism, because tourism is foreign tourism. When you talk about tourism, it's a foreign coming from outside. So if they don't come, it means you lose between 12 to 15 billion US dollar a year.
Does that include the civil aviation sector as well? Because
everything.
the air traffic was completely shut down.
Of course. You have the air traffic at very low rates and down, and you on all the firms or different corporations that working in that field. It's not only Egypt Air, but also land services. You have other supportive
cargoes and all these,
and food, nutrition, and supplies, and that you talk about a sector with tens of hundreds of workers and families. So if they don't find solutions to the deadlock that they suffer because
every single household, because you're either directly or indirectly affected by this
either
sector.
directly or indirectly affected by this situation where the economy is economic tempo is getting low and low.
Yes.
So what I would like to say here is as Egypt economy is achieving positive rates so far, and still the line is going increasing day after day. This is very optimistic issue. It means also that we have probably on daily or sometimes weekly rate, I would say, an increase in the Central Bank of Egypt foreign currency assets. As I said, we don't have due installments that Egypt did not pay. We are up to date when it comes to our international financial commitments. All this, when you put them all together, as you just mentioned, one thing also very important, which is although the problems that was associated with the COVID-19 pandemic, we did not stop the construction symphony in Egypt, whether for new towns or cities or new infrastructure facilities in different locations. It means that we see this as a solution. It's not just it's not a luxury issue that we will just put it aside for a year or two. No, but even with all these existing issues when it comes to the suffering in the economy because of COVID-19, we insist that these lines of construction should continue.
Yes, but we're taking into consideration the precautionary and safety measures, and maybe that's why Egypt was maybe the only country that never went for 100% lockdown at the beginning of this pandemic. Now, I have one chance for one last question, and let's talk more about your perspective. I mean, political stability is one of the most important pillars of the development that Egypt has been witnessing in the recent years, of course, along with restructuring its institutions, as we spoke about, and along with restoring security, stability, and the solidarity of the state. So we're talking about a pyramid triangle that really meets and puts a solid ground on whatever is being built over after that. So let's talk about the reasons behind how, if I may put it in a pyramid's format, is being very strong and rigid.
Stability, development based on stability, and stability based on security. And security is not just a police issue or judge or judiciary authority.
It's a collateral sort of thing.
Yeah, it's like collateral effect. We rely on each other. Those circles are working all together to come out at the end with this harmonized, symphony of performance. Yes, probably we did not reach this optimal level of performance when it comes to the parliament, whether the Congress or the People's Assembly or Parliament, but we are moving in the way. Holding the elections and setting or paving the road for more stable and more progressively developed political life in Egypt is very much complementary to the economic reforms program. I cannot dispart them. I cannot look at them in separate
On
lines.
an isolated level,
No, they're like intertwining together. You can't have this without that. So,
and the wiseness of the good administration that is making this clear vision in working towards this common ground, I think, is also
it's sort of panoramic vision that combine all this serious and important things together. And we cannot exclude anyone or any circle of this out of the image today because it will be very costly later. So all this, I always say, all the lines have to go in parallel lines together and working at the very same time. I think also that the Egyptian expertise when it comes to economic reforms will have its positive impact on our political life within the coming few years. Because I always convinced that economy is the magic word of positive changes in any society. It's not politics, it's economy.
It's not, of course it is, yes.
It's economy. So if you have progressively developed economy.
But we can add to that the cultural perspective, because that's again where the mentality grows.
Yeah, everything will change.
Yes.
Everything will change. That's why I always say that the economic reform program in Egypt is really creative. Yes, it was very tough, but it was very creative in terms of being so decisive and going to the point. Today, people realize more the services, and most of these services that are like 10 years ago
being used and seen, and yes, I understand.
They are very touchy
yes.
in terms of consumption, which is good. Like the Western world, we dream to be like those countries in the West.
And
but
they're
if we
much
go
more
there,
aware
everything
now.
is responsible there. You use electricity.
You pay for it.
You pay for it.
Exactly.
You pay for everything. But we were not.
You pay for the roads because for some reason
for
they think that
roads,
the roads
yes,
cost
for the road,
public,
yeah.
meaning that you don't spend a penny.
You
but
pay for
that's
anything.
again a mentality that has changed.
That's why you are there. People are mature when it comes to their consumption of their services. But we are reaching that level today, which is, as I always say, economy is the magic word. If you go economically in the right direction, a lot of things will be, going in the right direction simultaneously and spontaneously also, by the way, because people will start to realize that whatever you would like to use...
Yes, it becomes a domino effect.
Yeah, it's a domino effect.
Exactly.
It's a domino effect. And after some time also, they will realize that instead of having 5 babies or 6 or 7...
Let's have 2 or 3,
let's have 2 or 3 or 1, because if you get 5...
and reprioritize our life. I mean, for some reason, people believe that eating is number 1 priority over education, health, and everything else. Yes.
Exactly. So I think this phase that we go through in Egypt today is very critical and very also decisive for laying ground for more openness in terms of being capitalistic country.
Of course, yes. 2 more minutes and a wrap up. What are your final hopes, your final words on your hopes for 2021?
Well, 2020 is a very tough year indeed. It came with a lot of suffering and problems, and I always...
Thank God we made it so far, alive and healthy.
Hopefully we'll make it. Nobody knows so far, because we're still some days, and it's. I hope that 2021 will be much brighter, and will hold much better news for all Egyptians and
the whole world,
and the
basically.
whole world, indeed. I think also that we learned a lot from this consecutive suffering of different events during 2020. Hopefully 2021 will be holding better news for us and better life conditions, better performance for our plans when it comes to economy or education or health care. And also I'm quite sure that Egyptian people deserve the best, inshallah, to happen in 2021.
Let's hope so as well. Well, Dr. Ibrahim Al-Ghazawy, Professor of International Relations, I'd like to thank you very much for joining me here on the Daily Debate. Thank you very much. And that brings us to the end of our episode of the Daily Debate. Of course, we still have one more episode, I believe, before 2020 ends. And we are, of course, at this time of the year where we like to reflect back on Egypt and the most important stances and the most important events and the most successful stories. And of course, here in Egypt especially, you always have a new successful story happening every day. I'm Yasmin Bakir signing off. The top stories will be coming up next. Thank you for watching.